Good evening. My name is Sandra Campbell, and welcome to Omnibus Roundtable. I'd like for you to grab a pen and call a friend and join me and my wonderful host and our wonderful guest with our topic for this evening. Starting to my right,
Margot Richmond.
thank you.
Hi, I'm Roxy Williams. Welcome to the show.
And last but not least,
Elizabeth Johnson.
thank you, Liz. Welcome, ladies. This evening, our wonderful guest is Mr. Don Samuelson. Don, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I've never been on The View before. I'm 70 years old. I grew up in Chicago on the north side in the North Park area. My mother died when I was 5, so I lived with my father for about 7 years until he remarried. And so I had some experience of growing up in a single-parent household,
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
strangely enough. And my stepmother came across me, and I had developed a habit of being a little bit obnoxious in school. So, because I was pretty smart and I was very verbal. So, she thought it would be good for me to try something that I had no ability or interest in. So they found that was playing the piano.
Oh, wow.
So she took it upon herself to get me to learn to play the piano, and she sort of overdid it since I did it about 4 hours a day for 5 years.
Oh, wow.
And even a monkey can become a good pianist in that period
You
of time.
did that.
I don't know. Okay.
And then she concluded that if she could teach me to play the piano, she could teach anyone, and she had a very successful piano teaching
Oh,
career.
wow.
And meanwhile, we were pretty poor, actually, so I worked before school and after school. I went to high school at Niles, and I went to Dartmouth College.
Mm-hmm.
Got through and was about to go into the ministry because I'd been very active in my church all
wow.
along. And decided not to and went to the Peace Corps for 2 years in Nigeria from 62 to 64. And when I got through the Peace Corps, I had to earn some money to go to law school, so I sold fuller brushes door to door for a year. And then went to University of Chicago Law School, which was kind of the citadel of reason and intellectual comfort, and got caught up with actually being interested in law and went to Kirkland and Ellis as a lawyer for about 3 years,
Very prestigious.
a litigator, and then I went back to the law school as the assistant dean, and then I got recruited to set up the State Housing Finance Agency for Governor Ogilvie. And that was really an objective to put together a public agency that can operate with private sector efficiency, but with a public interest in honesty. So it was sort of a magical Camelot-like time in the early 60s, where I did that until 63, and then for the last 40 years or 45 years, I've been developing and managing and owning government-assisted housing developments.
Right.
And for a period of time, I was an executive search consultant for lawyers. And more recently, I've been involved in litigation with the federal government related to a terminated HAP contract.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
You
said a little bit. There is nothing little about you, right?
These are all,
Incredible.
Boy, this is just a little bit.
these are tops of icebergs of experience.
That's absolutely incredible. Tell me about one of your greatest accomplishments in a career such as that.
That's interesting. I don't think I've ever thought about that before. But I think the greatest accomplishment I probably had was learning to play the piano well, where it is a demonstration of you can learn to do something when you have no talent and no interest if you stick to it.
Absolutely. I can relate to that. I taught myself to type.
Yeah.
And I heard that you can type faster than folks can talk.
Yeah.
But that was an accomplishment for me to actually teach myself something and do it better than the people who actually learned it the right way and do it the right way. So.
And over the years, when I was counseling lawyers about their careers, my sense was that you should try to do something that you're really good at and enjoy.
Absolutely.
So young lawyers get out of law school at Yale and Harvard and Chicago, and they assume they should be working in Wall Street or big Chicago firms. And they get on that track, and they never stop to think about what would make them happy.
Correct.
So I wrote a book called Managing the Early Years, which is a strategic planning approach toward career planning. And the thought was asking a young lawyer, how do you want to live when you're 40? And they say, I don't know if I want to be a tax lawyer or work in a corporation. I said, let me make it simpler. Do you want to be married or not?
Absolutely.
Do you want to have children
Great.
or not?
Right.
Do you want to live in a
question.
house or do you want to rent? And ultimately, when you can, because you know how you'd like to live better than you know what you can do because you don't know that so well.
Absolutely.
And then once you know how you'd like to live, you have to say, what is that going to cost me to live that way?
Absolutely.
And then you can work backwards to earning enough to live the way you want to live when you've done it before you have more money than you need.
Correct.
So that it happens that, particularly with the University of Chicago Law School graduates, they all are doing very, very well. And none of them had any money to start with because we all were living on $6,000 a year in 1964, 5, 6, and 7. Now many of them are earning
that
a
wasn't a little money back then. I mean, it wasn't compared to the millions that many attorneys are able to earn now.
Yeah.
But that was good money back then.
But you also had to pay $3,000 in tuition to law school at that time.
And now they pay $100,000.
That made it real good.
Yeah.
So now it went from $3 to $100,000 that they have to pay.
Well, it's about
back.
$50,000 a year, but as opposed to $3,000. But they're earning $1 million and not $6,000, so
Right.
they've got extra money.
Right.
And that really depends on the field that they go into.
Yeah, and the type of the firm they have, and lawyers are not all wealthy, and they're not all. I mean, many of my classmates are working as judges and working as law professors and working in all sorts of activities. So that, but the point of this all was to begin to get people to start thinking about the way they like to live their life. Now we're having our 45th reunion for our law school this coming May.
Wow.
And several of the classmates have said what we should really do is think about what's next.
Yeah.
Right.
And that gets back into my thinking, my wheelhouse
Yeah.
of saying, well, how do you want to be living at the age of 80 or 70 now?
You're
How do you
right.
want to be living
10
at
years
80?
from now, where do you want to be?
And what have you done, and what are you interested in? And
Absolutely.
one of my classmates said, I've really been interested my entire life in being a woodworker,
Right.
in developing chairs and tables and things like that. So that's what he's going to do. A number of other people have gotten into mediation where they say, I think I can work 30 weeks a year, not 50, and 20 hours a week, not 60, and just slow down as opposed to change lanes on the highway.
Correct.
Now, I don't know what's going to happen because it's...
What did Don Samuelson say to himself? Don, what are you going to be doing in the next 10 years from now?
I can tell you, I would like to be essentially helping seniors learn how to get on the internet and use it fully.
And you've already began that path to
Yes.
success. And it's incredible. If you do have a pen, call a friend. It's incredible to see you now talk to our young people about thinking about what you want to do 10 years from now and begin your path that way. I asked an incredible question of a group of young people. I said, who's Michael Jordan? And they told me he's this incredible basketball player. I said, that's what he does for a living, but who is he? And so when I talked to Don Samuelson, I'd probably ask that same question. I know what you do for a living, but who are you? Who are you as a person? You have an incredible passion for seniors and education, and somehow you've married the two, and I love how you.
Well, it's come out of my religious upbringing and being Swedish.
Okay.
The Swedish Covenant Church is a kind of a minority church in Sweden after the Lutheran Church, the state church. And its basic philosophy has been to be helpful to other people.
Wow.
Okay.
And that people are measured not by how much they have done for themselves, but how much they've done for others.
Okay.
So I grew up in that tradition. So it's easy for me to do what I do because that's the way I was brought up. For people who are kind of brought up in situations where you're looking out for yourself, I mean, it's a much more difficult transition to make.
Correct.
So I've thought that if I can make enough money to keep my wife happy,
And if she looks 40 and she's a little under you,
and she's
that's
in
pretty
great
happy.
shape and she'll live to 100, and I probably won't. So she's got a
Oh, don't
longer
count
period
yourself out. You look good for 70.
But if only you could look at my electronic medical records, you'd have a different perspective.
But I've worked with seniors for years, and I had a senior that was 102 years old.
Yeah.
Well, that's
She was
good looking.
102.
That's good looking.
And the same question was posed to her. What would happen if God permitted you to live another 20 years? And she said, and they asked, what would you do differently? She said, I would take what I have right now and I would open up a business because I plan to live till I'm 105. She lived, I want to say 60 days. She had enough money to take care of herself and live in, like an assisted living. She lived in a home away from home facility where she paid X amount of dollars per month to be taken care of. 2 months prior, I want to say 2 months, it may be 1 month prior to her death, she had enough money to cover herself 1 more month.
Yeah.
That's an incredible story.
That's that's a difficult balancing to do.
Yeah.
It's kind of
But
planning
even-
to the extreme.
Right, and then even with that, when you asked her that question, she was ready to go on and open up a business or do some other great things. Very meek lady, very,
Right.
very, very meek, powerful, strong woman.
And that's an incredible story, and having you on the panel makes that even,
Yes.
more awesome for me, because you deal with the seniors that don't quite have that kind of planning for their lives. You deal with at-risk, maybe low-income seniors, and you have done some incredible work in getting them housing and getting them interested in the internet. And I want you to talk a little bit about that path that you've taken.
Well, in 1979, I developed a senior building in Lake Villa called Cedar Village, which was an atrium building in a wooded site. And it was my view at that point that the manager, I didn't want a manager who knew how to manage buildings. I want a manager who knew how to build people.
Right.
So the manager of the housing could do the bookkeeping, collect the rents, and do that, but she kept a happy home for 80 families, 80 seniors there. And the function she performed over the years, her name was Barbara Brown, and I thought of her as a concierge. That anything that a senior wanted from the community, as she talked to them, she would be able to connect them to that resource.
Correct.
That was in '79. Along about 1990 to 95, we started getting computers around. And then at that point, Barbara got a computer so she can facilitate her work in connecting people to resources. And then she started helping a couple of the seniors learn how to use the computers themselves.
Wow.
And then we put in a computer learning center in the building so all the seniors could learn how to use a computer.
Got, monitors and different equipment in, and
well, it's not
the
that
equipment was bought for them.
Yeah, well, we had a computer learning center at that point, so there's 5 computers that people could share out of the 80 in the building, and they were able to do that like you could in a library. But then in 1996, I started doing more housing with the Chicago Housing Authority, so I was responsible for 8 buildings, about 2,000 senior units. And I started putting in computer learning centers in those buildings. Now, the CHA didn't have any money at that point for these centers, but I said we can take part of the management fee that would otherwise be put in my wife's checking account, went into the creation of computer learning centers. So we did that for about 8 years. The thought was that we would both connect people to resources, and then, like giving them the ability of fishing, teach them how to use the computer so they can access resources on their own. So then I got involved at the invitation of HUD into a large lawsuit with them that kept me preoccupied for about 5 years while computer learning centers went on. And then in 2009, the President's stimulus program led to the creation of something called the Broadband Technology Opportunity Program, BTOP. And that was designed to stimulate the use of computers by at-risk populations. So I didn't do anything the first year of the plan. I just thought I would watch it in 2009. And I saw at the end of 2009 that there were no programs for seniors out of any of these.
Correct.
So I said that was sort of like low-hanging fruit. You know, they're the greatest at risk, the least users of the internet. If you really want to be serious about equipping people to work in the 21st century, that's a logical target. So I then set out to organize a coalition of 23 buildings in 10 northern Illinois cities, in Rock Island, Moline, Rockford, DeKalb, Henry County, Grundy County, Joliet, Oak Park, Kankakee.
And how did you design that? How did you?
I did them so they would be roughly representative of all the types of buildings in the United States.
Okay. Okay.
Some rural, some urban, some all black, some mixed black, trying to be representative of the various groups.
Now let's define, you keep using the term at risk for the audience who may not know what that means. When you say at risk seniors, define what it means, at risk means in this topic.
Well, generally the government regards vulnerable populations or at-risk populations of people who are poor, people who are older,
Mm-hmm.
people who are handicapped or disabled, people who don't speak English, and people who are poorly educated.
Okay.
Those are individuals who have some impediments to being able to work effectively in the current society. So the government program was to do that, so I selected these 23 buildings in 10 communities, and then thought it would be desirable to start out by figuring out as a baseline where they started from, which is important. Nobody wants to do that in demonstrations. They want to just start demonstrating.
Absolutely. We always want to go right here and forget the 1, 2, and just hit 3 right on.
Yeah, and I said, we really should figure out what we're starting with, one, and what we know about that and where we want to go, number 2.
I like the way you think. Somehow
It's a Swedish way of
I
thinking.
like
The
it.
Swedish way of
I
thinking.
just blame everything in the Swedish.
That's
Okay,
all right.
the
I'm
Swedish way of
going to
thinking.
Sweden.
But I'd like to ask another question because
One last
okay.
thing, then you do the interventions to get from here to there.
Okay. I have a question. You named some downstate communities.
Mhm.
What is it a lot easier to work with downstate communities as opposed to the big urban areas up here? Because it looks like to me that because everybody's budget. I'm a former chairman of the Gary Housing Authority. And we had those kind of issues that was before us. Where are the computers for the seniors? With so many major cuts that came through. But yet, when I got through reading your page, I was just like, oh my God.
Right, and incredibly, I kind of second that because having run the state program for action for child care initiative,
Yeah.
I used to be in Cook County as a regional director, and I told them if it works in Cook County,
Yeah.
it works all over the state. And so I would like to know how you arrive there, because sometimes you start with the larger to show it a proven product, and then it just kind of catches fire across the
Yeah.
downstate area.
I
You
found
are
that
very
I
interesting.
found that the best way to do it is to start with somebody who is in charge of something real
Okay.
Okay.
in the ground
Yes.
and cares about it.
So you went to established
There you go.
organizations that dealt with seniors, or were established community-based organizations?
And really we're not bureaucratic,
They had
we're really
a-
truly
correct.
mission driven.
Okay.
Their view
Okay,
of
that's-
their success was the success of their audience, not the success of themselves.
And they were
Gotcha.
nonprofits, I take it.
Some were housing authorities, and some
Okay.
were, two of them that I think, or 3 of them that we
That's-
worked with in Chicago are probably 3 of the best nonprofits. Donald Dew at HSI, Annetta Wilson at Sankofa House, and the people at Bethel New Life. They're representative, I think, of the best examples of inner city service organizations. And so you could count on them to be serious about this. The people in DeKalb, well, in fact, all of them were. I selected them because I had the feeling, by talking to them, they really wanted to do this and have something achieved out of it.
So you found a connection.
Yeah,
to
because
your
whatever
vision.
you do, and we get back to that, whatever you do, if your heart is not in for the people
Right.
and the conditions, and those people are anxious and they're excited, then if you don't have the heart for them, then they're in trouble in the beginning. But if you come in and you can find management who has the heart for people,
Sure.
because a lot of management doesn't really have that. They're in there and they've got their sleeves rolled up, but a lot of times they're missing the mark.
Well, they go home at 5 o'clock, and in this situation, you like people who don't even look at the clock.
They're not watching the clock.
Absolutely.
We're
yeah.
not watching the clock tonight. It's just a matter of why, and I still have to drive back to Lake Forest, and so we get through at 11 o'clock, and I'll be home at
Absolutely.
12 o'clock, and I have to get up at 7 o'clock in the morning.
Absolutely.
But I must commend you if you reside in Lake Forest. I understand the attitudes and the
Yeah.
sentiments up there. And again, what he's saying as far as not watching the clock and being really committed to working with people opposed to the bottom line
Mhm.
is very rare.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
that's around. And Lake County has a lot of resources. However, they have a lot of people, we have a lot of money for resources, and yet they have very, very limited resources when it comes to humanitarian efforts.
That's it.
Well, let me say another thing about Sweden, for example. in
I'm
my
really,
upbringing.
I'm really liking this because I wonder in your lifetime if someone has ever called you a visionary leader, just to see you take Barbara, let's talk
Yeah, Barbara Brown.
and make her a concierge and make her the one-stop shop that everybody talks about, but she was about taking care of the things that she was responsible for.
Yeah, she was the person I think everybody knew that at
That's-
that point, that she was empowered, that she was more than me. If you
Right.
wanted to get something done, you went to Barbara, not to me.
And you're only as good, I say this as a manager, you're only as good as the people who work for you,
Mhm.
so you must be an extremely good person.
Well, my grandfather invented the Coca-Cola bottle and patented it.
Oh,
And so
wow.
we've come from a line of sort of creative people, and periodically the Göteborg Posten will come to Chicago to do an interview with me as the grandson of this creative visionary guy. And for a while, I thought they really were interested in me.
They were.
But it really turned out that they wanted to come to Chicago and wanted to have an excuse to come to Chicago.
Well,
Let's go see Don Samuelson. That's
but he
right.
did
Didn't
speak
his
to
grandfather been
early
something?
on in the years. You mentioned that you had gone to the Peace Corps.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
it goes back to his base.
Yeah.
His base was church.
Right. I was,
Service,
you know,
service
when
community.
I found out that he was in Nigeria, you know, my son's bicultural.
Yeah.
He's partially American and Nigerian. And just to know that you've had that kind of experience and then you bring that wealth of exposure
And that was in
back to the
62 to
States.
64.
Okay.
And it was interesting, the Peace Corps at that point was just started. The year I went in was the year it started.
Wow.
And it was the Camelot in the Kennedy administration. It was the thing that everyone talked about. And it was, when I came back, I was a minor celebrity and I spoke at various things.
Oh,
but
minor, just minor.
not equal to Justin Bieber, of course. But it was regarded as a good thing and interesting. And the people who were in the Peace Corps were generally very enthusiastic, entrepreneurial, and risk-taking. It was a grand adventure for them. And they also, they were not zealot like wanting to do good. They were there because it was interesting and they would do good and they would have fun, and then when they were there they began to get more inspired into it. But when I was in eastern Nigeria at a little place called Obeleki, which is near Nsukka, where the university is. And I was 20 miles away on a laterite road with a motorcycle, so I was in an area where there's only 2 white people out of 1 million people.
You didn't stick out like a sore thumb,
Not
of
like
course.
there were some albinos that I associated
I
with.
love it.
But you begin to find that when you're in a place like that for 2 years, you know, I became very sensitive to the gradations and the colors of black.
Yes.
Even all of you are hugely
Different
different in your coloration.
Absolutely.
And sort of, you begin to be much more attuned to that, but more importantly, you get to see that that throughout the world, people in the villages are interested in their children, they're interested in their
Absolutely.
We have the
welfare.
same
You have so
interests.
many things
Yes,
in
we do.
common.
We have
Yeah.
the same interests.
Yeah.
We have
Same
the same goals,
ambitions.
the same passions. Now, I want to take you back to your process for assisting the seniors into getting online. You shared with us earlier a really great process that you have for introducing seniors who are computer illiterate. Just tell me real quick, because we don't have a whole lot of time, just the 3 steps that you do.
Yeah, there's 3 steps. The first step is we take your computer off the desk here, so nobody knows a computer here. So the first computer lesson has me talking to them about their interests. What are you interested in? So we talk for an hour about their interest. I have an easel here, and I write down grandchild 2, Skokie, Illinois, knitting, and at the end of an hour I find out what their interests are.
Okay.
And I say, well, how did you enjoy your first computer lesson? They say, what's that about? There's no computer here.
It wasn't really about computers.
And I said, well, now we're going to have your second computer lesson next week. Then I go off, take my computer, Google up their interest, come back with a 3-ring binder. No computer, the 3-ring binder of things that I've discovered on the internet relevant to their interest.
Okay.
Oh, gotcha.
And then at the end of, we're not talking about the computer, we're just talking about the stuff on the folder.
Yeah, now we've caught up with the binder, right?
That is so incredible. You take the fear away, and I like that.
And then the last thing is about the end of that period, people say, well, how did you do that? And I said, the next class will be actually with a computer where we'll show you, the objective is to learn something fairly simple, which is how to turn on and off the computer, how to move the cursor, how to get an internet address, how to get email, send email, how to access the web, and how to use perhaps Word as a word processing. Just that.
Yeah.
And I think that's really enough to get to be able to operate on the information superhighway. You have a driver's license or a learner's permit on the information superhighway. After that, we can guide you down various paths and destinations, but it has to be done really on your own. So it's an individualized experience.
And that's great because
That's a
listen,
great
look at what's actually happening. You know, you have a lot of seniors that are going into the banks. I'm in insurance. So the insurance companies don't want to do business. A lot of the insurance companies, I want to say a huge deal, or maybe 90% of them, if they don't, if you know, they don't want them to, they don't want to do the collection anymore.
Yeah.
So they want them to go online, or either they want to draft their accounts. And seniors are very, very
Particular
very
about their
careful not to
information.
allow people to go in their bank accounts.
Because they're a vulnerable population.
And then they're trying to teach them.
Truly.
So the seniors are coming out in droves to the banks every month to make sure that things like this is happening. And I hear tellers all the time talking to them about the service reps, their customer service, well, you need to do this online, you need to do this online. But seniors have a very difficult time. So, you know.
Well, and to speak to that, my mother's 70, and it took my son to actually make her feel at ease sitting in front of a computer terminal. It was so intimidating.
Or-
Here's Miss Intimidation herself.
Or her grandson.
Absolutely.
I told you we had a discussion
Right.
about
Well,
that
you
before
know-
we got on about how your grandchildren will motivate grandparents before they'll listen to their grandchildren before they'll listen to their
To
children.
anybody else.
And
That's
they will
true.
buy they will go out and
That is
buy
true.
a
Yeah, I heard
$2,000
that.
computer
Right.
for their grandchildren.
Well, you know,
But my mother now is navigating Yahoo, so I'm really glad about it.
we're running out of time. I want to do closing remarks, and we're going to continue this discussion. So tune in. Okay, let's take our closing remark first. The first part from our guest, Mr. Samuelson. What remark would you like to give? 20 seconds for seniors, be it or legal advice. 20 seconds.
I think just learning how to get on the computer and getting online. I have a blog that I write called www.getseniorsonline.org. www.getseniorsonline.org. If people go to that, they'll begin to see what's going on and join the conversation. And that will be a kind of a stimulus, I think, to continuing the effort.
Okay, great. Liz, you said the least of all. 20 seconds.
Seniors, talk to your grandchildren. They will steer you on the information highway.
All right, Roxy.
I think if there's any young person out there listening to Don Samuelson, I think you need to get on the computer and Google him and find out much more than this show could tell you about a man that is really on the move in the right direction.
Thank you, ma'am. And Miss Margot.
I'm speaking to all of the children of these seniors. Now it's time to turn the table around. Let's start purchasing computers for your seniors, your grandma. Get the gifts and get them rolling out.
Okay, great.
Good
Thank
advice.
you. Well, again, my name is Sandra Campbell. I want to thank you for joining my co-hosts, Margot Richmond, Roxy Williams, and Elizabeth Johnson, and our wonderful guest, Mr. Don Samuelson. Join us again on Omnibus Roundtable. Okay, now, with all of these new interventions that you're doing, and these inventions for you people,